Okay, welcome back. So, in the last lesson, we took a look at FumeFX, and now we're going to do a little Krakatoa stuff. So, okay, this is that fume grid of the low-res tornado. But, okay, what's a good idea is if you actually just make any fume grid, right? We can open this up. We can just go and find the cache files of that low-res fume sim, or of any fume sim, right? So in here, we've got FumeFX, Tornado, Tornado 1, Tornado Low. Okay, we'll grab these FXD files. So, do you want to match the FumeFX grid to the one in the file? Usually, yes means you want to use existing output files, so let's hit yes. Okay, and now you'll notice we've got our FumeFX grid, so that's cool. And it plays and it works, and we can drag our thing through, and you can see a little low-res tornado. And sometimes if it doesn't work, it doesn't stick, you can hit this match, go to File, Match Grid in File, and that'll make it do that. So, okay, let's make the timeline a bit longer. So we simmed 200 frames. So let's go frame 200, so we can use our jazz. And you're like, hey, what happened? It doesn't work. This will happen sometimes. Remember, when that happens and you know you've simmed something, it's always this playback range, which will screw you over time and time again. Playback 2, we want it to go to 200 frames, right? So now we've got our data there. And, it's like if you wanted this thing to start at 80, and you started at 80, you'd run into a problem where it's not like it offsets this playback thing. So you should really then go 80 to 280, right? And then you'd have your sim offset 80 frames, which gets tedious. Okay. So now we got our fume sim, and that's cool. So one of the things you'll get access to, and let's make it look a little prettier, easier to look at. So, oops, key mode, change this to a color, a little bit of that. Okay, and then drag this high threshold down so we can kind of see it. Now, there's not really a lot of detail there, is there? Anyways, yeah. Just give us something to look at. I don't know. I always think it looks better like that. So, okay. Let's make a particle system. Standard particles. That's primitives. Particle systems. Particle flow source. So we'll make one of these guys. It doesn't even matter. We should just use the particle view. You can just press 6 is usually the hotkey for that. So let's do a FumeFX birth. Let's just kind of get rid of all this stuff, right? So we'll make a new particle system, empty flow, and we'll do a FumeFX birth. But you don't have to. You could birth it from anything and just have the FumeFX kind of guide it along. So now it's going to birth where the FumeFX births. We'll pick the fume grid. Oh, sorry. You click this button, pick the fume grid, and then we see particles starting to get born on our tornado. Why didn't they spawn? Because their birth should go to 200. So now you can see our tornado is being made of particles. And yeah, it gets a little slow because it's reading in those cached frames. But particle flow is actually a lot better at this than thinking particles. Thinking particles, for some reason, it's a little bit slower at doing this. I mean, not much, but so okay, we can do that. We can do a delete on here now, and I mean you can spawn them this way. You'll notice though they aren't like inheriting really the movement. They're essentially just getting the velocity vector of where they were spawned, and they're just kind of going in that direction. If you want them to kind of follow the movement, well then you can do a FumeFX follow operation, which is really cool. So we can then just add a FumeFX follow in. It's going to recalculate. Let's bring it down here to here. Okay, so now the particles are going to birth and follow that fume sim. So let's only actually have them birth for 20 frames, right? What's going to happen there? Let's emit a lot more particles. Right, and maybe kind of a boring time to birth them. let's birth at 20 to 80. Okay. So we've got a bunch of particles that are going to follow this FumeFX simulation. And that's kind of cool. So let's just leave this on for the whole frame range. 0 to 200. We'll just birth 1,000 particles. And so you'll notice that what I am going to make is essentially that tornado video I showed at the beginning of this. So we'll tools, grab viewport, sequence file. We'll make this big and kind of let it run. Runs a lot faster here, which is always awesome. And now what you can do with Krakatoa is you can essentially use a technique called partitioning to just bake out a lot of particles. So you can essentially run this, and your computer can do this kind of thing pretty quickly, and you can just tell it to do that, let's say, 100 times, and you can use like the maximum amount of memory you can put in that computer, and then you can combine all that together, and you'll get a much denser particle cloud than if you were just doing it, all in one simulation. So here we got this guy, and he it follows the tornado, and it's getting the tornado's motion. It's really simple, and you can do other things, like you can still advect this with normal fields, and you have kind of the influence numbers you can play around with. You can set like a velocity multiplier, which is actually really fun. And so we'll set that to 3, but then we'll only set the influence to like 30%. And let's see what happens. Tools, grab viewport, and it's going to run through that. So with Krakatoa, the particles just use such little memory that you can render hundreds of millions of particles, and it's pretty cool. And I did it on this tornado, but it wasn't that successful because I kind of did it really fast, and I had that velocity multiplier up too high. And while the velocity multiplier usually looks cooler, like in the viewport here, you get really tempted by this. When you do it in Krakatoa, it can start to have this kind of look that is unpleasing, and I should have used additional fields to kind of break up that look, but I didn't. And so that's why I just kind of, when I comped it together, I just used a little bit of the Krakatoa. Like, there were just parts of it that I thought were cool. I didn't take the whole thing. Okay, so we got this thing, and just for dramatic effect, we'll try with this. But I would recommend not using a higher velocity multiplier unless you're kind of like this, turning the influence way down, or using some other fields to get in there, or else you'll start to get this kind of very gross, like, this is obviously low resolution FumeFX kind of look. Bring Krakatoa to front. So to switch this over, let's say you're not in Krakatoa. Current actually saves. Oh, what is going on? I wonder if it's recalculating my particle system. But yeah, you got to go to Assign Renderer and then choose Krakatoa, and it'll pop up, and it has this monstrous UI, which, while may look like it has a lot of buttons at first, it's actually really cool, and it's just kind of everything you need right here. Very simple user interface. And it's come a long way. It used to just be really this panel. Now they've got all these PRT loaders and PRT objects that can do really cool things. Like, you can load this FumeFX file directly into Krakatoa, which is, I think, how they want you to do it nowadays. Like, you can go here and create PRT fume objects. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, you can make a PRT fume object, and then, because I had that FumeFX clicked, it just automatically made it from there. And so I believe, let's see, if we go here, you can see it's generating like the point cloud representing the fume grid, and it's really cool. Like, you can render a lot of points this way. It just kind of makes this dense volume cloud. It's a substitute for the renderer for like Scanline or V-Ray or whatever. But I find that this way doesn't look quite as interesting as still just running particles through it. Like, this way is a lot easier and a lot faster, but it just doesn't look good. It looks like a mess of points, which is cool, but you usually want that look of motion and tons of particles swirling around. Let's delete this guy. Okay, so we've got these guys, and we'll just render a frame here. So it's gonna, calculate up to that part. in the simulation, and then it's going to render. And you're not going to see anything unless you turn on the alpha channel, because we don't have any lights in the scene. Krakatoa needs lights in the scene to work. Okay, so that's Krakatoa. Did you see how fast it rendered that? Really cool. Let's turn on additive mode just for fun. So you can see we're going to need a lot more particles. And that's the thing with Krakatoa. You need a lot of particles because it just renders them as teeny points. And you have options in here like here I'm doing particle rendering. You can do voxel rendering. It's a little slower, but you can get kind of closer to them, which is nice. So let's go in here and set this up to be flexible. So we're going to always set this upper limit to just as many particles as you can. You know, I've changed mine so it's like a quadrillion, but like, you know, it's not going to come in like that. And then the viewport multiplier, this is a really good way to work with Krakatoa. I'm going to set this to 0.1. So we're going to see very, very few particles. And it's going to be nice because we're going to wait longer at render time, but we're going to be able to scrub, which is awesome. So now we can just turn this rate up higher. So that's a lot of particles. Let's take a look. So we're not going to see many in the viewport. It's only calculating just a few here. But this is 0.1 of all the particles that we're going to render. So I'm just going to move to here. I'm just going to make it calculate few frames just to see if this brings the computer to a halt. Hopefully it won't. 80. Looks like it's going relatively fast. Okay. So that's our particle system. It's an additive mode, which maybe we should turn off. All right, let's add some lights to the scene to actually make this look good. We'll just add a standard. We'll just add an omni light right here. Okay, and we'll turn shadow mapping on. Oh, thank you. Shadows on, and yeah. Oh, that's nice. I didn't know it would do that. It's kind of cool. Kind of wish it would go back to the way it was. But anyways, let's plus render again. So turn off additive mode. And you can do a lot of really cool things. Like you can render waters this way. Only Omni lights are not currently supported. All right. Well, let's just use Spotlight. Command panel. Lights. Target Spotlight. Just do one of these. Okay, put it up here. And on, shadows on. Alright, now let's try rendering. Okay, so we've got green particles. And I mean, it's a pretty cool look. You know, you can see it can get very thick and dense, and I mean that's still pretty quick to sim, you know. Let's try going in a few more frames, see what we get. And the nice thing about Krakatoa is, yeah, it's going to take a while to get up to your frame range in the simulation. But once it's there, you can change it and tweak it and re-render it because it caches that to disk. So the real tactic here, though, is to render out a ton of these particles and then combine them together using a PRT object. And that's what I did here. And I mean, just do as many as you can. Deadline can run on every single core of your machine, so you can do, you know, up to 16 cores. You have a 16 core machine, you can do 16 partitions. Otherwise, just like let it go overnight, or if you have a kind of distributed computing network, you can run that stuff over there because it's only single threaded. Now we're just waiting on this to update, and you can see it's green here because the particle color in particle flow is set to green, so like the display color. So whatever you display them as, it just takes from that, which is really simple. And there's this whole thing called magma flow for actually making kind of shaders with this stuff, and you have kind of subsurface scattering options, which comes completely for free here. So, all right, we're gonna while it does its thing here, we're gonna pause this lesson, and we'll return next time with Krakatoa Part 2. Okay. Oh, it came back. A little treat. Okay, so you can see that's pretty cool. All right, we'll be right back.